News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here. On a Monday, I hope you had a good weekend. Gosh, wasn't the weather great? Just beautiful, and it's going to be nice. Summer's finally feeling like it's here, though it was chilly this morning. So sit back, have your cup of coffee, and just enjoy the show. Again, MorningLine coming to you live this morning, and we're taking your calls. We're going to talk about a topic that we were planning on doing anyway. It's also something that's made the forefront of the news over the last week, primarily because of the horrible massacre at the Waffle House there in Antioch. And the issue of gun safety, gun rights, gun control, all of that comes up again. And I know here in Tennessee, where we're a very strong Second Amendment state, we know that. People are very, very cautious about where you go with this kind of discussion and whether or not you talk about laws to do this and that. But I think most people agree somewhere along the lines, whether you're dealing with guns or the individuals with mental illness or otherwise, needs to be looked at. I mean, that's rational anyway. So we're going to talk about that with our guest this morning. The number on the screen, 737-7587. If you want to join us, talk with Beth Joslin Roth. Good morning to you, Beth.
Good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you today. She's with Safe Tennessee Project, Executive Director and the Policy Director of that. Just let folks know what Safe Tennessee Project is.
We're a nonprofit focused on reducing gun violence in our state. We are an all-volunteer organization. We're nonpartisan. We are 501c3. We believe very much in studying research and the data in hopes of helping our lawmakers make informed policy decisions.
How long have you guys been around?
We started in 2015.
2015. So
3 years.
Okay, 3. And yeah, obviously, you know, organizations like yours have popped up, I'm sure, all across the country, especially in lieu of some of these mass shootings. Is that some of what, I mean, I guess gun violence in general, though, but the mass shootings are the ones that make the really big headlines.
That's true. I mean, there's definitely been, you know, for years there have been a number of organizations that have been studying this issue and trying to advocate for gun law reform. But it is the mass shootings, the ones, and not just mass shootings, the ones that we would refer to as more of the spectacle mass shootings, the ones that get all the news coverage, that tend to sort of get everybody's attention and get people interested in the issue.
Right, but every morning I come in almost in the newsroom, there's some shooting from overnight. It just happens.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, there's certainly mass shootings which are horrible and very jarring, but you know, there's also, you know, mass shootings make up a small fraction overall of gun violence. You know, the everyday gun violence is what really takes its toll on our society.
Well, we should say your organization supports the Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
You do not advocate confiscating guns, and you do not want to take guns away from any law-abiding citizen. But the fact remains, what some of the numbers here. Nashville has seen a 160% increase in homicides in the past 4 years. Tennessee is the 4th most dangerous state, according to violent crime data from the FBI. So, what do we do about it? And we can get into this. We're going to take calls from folks, but of course most recently was the Waffle House incident. We're going to talk on mass shootings for a moment. And before that, just last September was a shooting also in Antioch at the church there, at Burnett Chapel Church of Christ. And on so many of these cases, there have been red flags aware. But the problem is, you can see someone who's got a mental illness, is kind of weird and all of this, but they haven't committed a crime. Just because you're sick up here and need help doesn't mean we can just throw you in jail and take your gun away, right? I mean, that's the problem. But then, of course, there's no debating. This shooter in Waffle House should not have had the gun, and his father should not have given them back to him. End of story. Why does that happen?
Well, one of the things that I think people don't fully understand is when you talk about red flag laws or red flags that come up, the federal law, which is what Tennessee follows, says that the only way that a, you know, quote unquote mentally ill person can have their guns, or that they can be prohibited from having guns or have their guns removed from their possession, is if they are adjudicated mentally ill by a court, which that's
hard to do.
It's very hard. That means involuntary voluntarily committing someone,
right,
which happens very, very rarely.
So in this case with the Waffle House shooter, we all know that, you know, he had this incident at the White House where he was arrested. Secret Service looked into his background. They got with the Illinois authorities, said, you know what, we don't think this kid should have guns anymore. And the father stepped up and said, I'd take him. But there was never anything adjudicated. Now you have the Secret Service saying this, and it kind of a handshake agreement, it seems like, between the sheriff in Illinois and the father that he's going to take the guns and keep them from the son. So there's a promise, but technically it doesn't look like the father, at least to this point, broke a law in giving the guns back to his son because there was not a court order prohibiting him from doing that.
Well, it gets a little confusing. So in terms of dispossessing guns, which means giving your guns up to another person for them to keep for you for a period of time, you know, it is sort of done on the honor system, which I think is concerning to most people. You know, personally, what I would like to see happen is the person who is going to be keeping those guns, I believe they should have to sign an affidavit that acknowledges that they are responsible for keeping those guns out of the possession of the prohibited person. And if they return those guns, that they would be charged with a felony. There has to be sort of some teeth in that law for it to be meaningful. You know, we have laws in Tennessee that are similar in that if you are required to dispossess your firearms, if you are convicted of a domestic violence offense, if you have an order of protection against you, if a judge orders you to dispossess your guns, you sign a form that says that you will do that, and that's really the extent of what happens. There's no mechanism in place to make sure that you comply, nor is there a mechanism in place to prosecute someone if they're keeping your guns and they return them to you. So those are the types of loopholes that we think we should be able to address. Those are things that I think most everyone would agree. We need to do a better job of having those rules clearly laid out so that people completely understand what the law is and that they are held to a legal consequence if they don't comply with their end of the bargain, in this case the father giving the guns back. What's also interesting is that Illinois has much stronger gun laws than we have in Tennessee. So in Illinois, to purchase or possess a firearm, you have to have either a concealed carry permit or a gun license, which is called a firearm owner identification card, or FOID card. You have to have one of those two things to buy a gun or to possess a gun in Illinois. So the Secret Service
pulled his FOID card, didn't they?
They pulled it. So he was not allowed in Illinois to be in possession of firearms because his card had been revoked. However, as soon as he came to Tennessee with those guns, he was allowed to have them because we don't have any laws requiring you to have a permit or any type of license to purchase or possess guns in our state. You have to have a gun permit if you're going to carry the gun in public, but just to be in possession of the guns, anybody can be in possession of guns. So that's sort of another one of those loopholes that it would seem to me that if another state, if authorities in another state have decided that they think a person is enough of a risk that they don't want them having guns, we should apply that same standard to them when they're in our state. So you know what's kind of crazy about this whole thing is really until that shooter at Waffle House got out of his car with that AR-15, the only law that he was breaking was indecent exposure.
That's right.
When he got out of the car and began firing the bullets, obviously that's a different thing, but because of the fact that Illinois has strong laws and we have weak laws, he was not breaking a law by being in possession of those guns, despite all of the concerning behavior in his past.
Yeah, I think one of the keys they'll be looking into is exactly when it was the father gave the gun back to him. Whether it was once he was here, if he gave it to him in Illinois and then he came down with him, then that could be a violation. But what's interesting is we go to the break, and I'll be curious to hear what some of our viewers think, and we're getting some calls in already, is on the issue of gun control, I think, and you mentioned the AR-15, and one side of it is discussing, you know, what kind of guns should be available. And that's, to me, it seems a much more contentious debate. There are folks out there that say they want to legally own an AR-15, they should have a right to do that. But with regard to placing limits on people that are mentally ill, if you're one of those people who is a gun advocate and or otherwise who doesn't like the idea of placing limits on people from mentally ill having a gun, please call in because I want to know about your sanity. That's the one thing to me that I just don't see how there's, whatever side you are, whether you are the most anti-gun person or the most pro-gun person, everyone should agree we don't need guns in the hands of nutcases, all right? Right? Can we all agree on that? And there should be something to limit it. The debate that we'll talk about, too, on what kind of guns folks should have access to, which I think is more contentious, we'll get into as well. So the phone lines are open, 737-7587. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to your calls and more of our conversation with our guest on guns right after this.
The Beth